I want to shift our focus to Western Europe
Yeah,
now.
sure.
But how will I connect that to is by asking you about how Trump believes that the EU countries, the NATO countries, aren't putting enough resources
Yeah,
and
true.
monetary support to the NATO.
Yeah. So I'll just, because it's a very long story about how Europe has kind of found its footing back in the world after the world wars, but I'll try to be brief. See, what has basically happened is that, Europe has had a very bloody history. Europe has been forever at wars since the last 1000 years almost, right? From the fall of the Roman Empire to almost the advent of enlightenment and, all that. They've been like 1000 years of basically wars and wars and wars. And then there were Napoleonic wars, and then there were the world wars and all that. So after the Second World War, and especially with the kind of experience they had with Nazi Germany and all that, and the kind of Holocaust, and I mean, n number of things, I think the Europeans became very certain that if they want to survive, they really have to stop going to war. And the best way to do that, from their perspective, because of that history, was to integrate economically, try to get everybody. And of course, those were the days of the Iron Curtain, because half the Europe was divided between, USA and USSR. So you have all the Central and East European countries, like to the east, which were at the other side of the Iron Curtain. So Czech Republic, that at that time it was Czechoslovakia, countries like Poland, countries like Romania, Bulgaria, so many of these countries, they were all, in fact, Germany was divided into two. Okay. Now, long story short, what had happened was that in those years, when Europe enjoyed, for the first ever time in their recent history, 50 years, 70 years of relative stability. Of course, there were, in small pockets, there were problems, there were revolutions, there were, like for example, in Yugoslavia, there was a,
Right.
there was a very bloody history, etc. But relatively speaking, that happened because of three core dependencies. Okay. For their security, they were dependent on the US and NATO. And in NATO, the biggest contributor is the US. For their markets, manufacturing, they got dependent on China. And for their cheap oil and gas, they were dependent on Russia. And especially gas. Because, the Soviet era had these massive pipelines, like there's a network of pipelines in Europe which bring gas from Russia into Soviet Union into Europe. And in fact, back before 1991, even Ukraine was a part of the Soviet Union. And so you have all these pipelines coming from there to Germany, etc., and then getting further distributed. So that was the tripartite kind of a dependence that they created, and it really worked in their favor. And that is how the economic bloc was born, and then it thrived and all that. What they thought was that this is their formula to stability and peace.
Right.
Okay. Later on, it turned out that it was not the case. And of course, there were people in the EU that said that no, you also have to develop your defense vector and your strategic vector. Because, see, for a geo-economic group, to also have geostrategic traction, you have to have defense capabilities. But Europeans, and especially the bigger economies, like Germany, etc., said that, but we don't want that, right? Why? Because this model is working so well and the German economy was booming. But things changed in 2014 with Crimea. But because they were so dependent on Russian gas, they didn't want to, ruffle too many feathers, and they wanted to continue as business as usual. But then it happened again in 2022. Right now, because they have a war in their own backyard, this is not a far-flung war in Vietnam or in Afghanistan, where they can just bring the boys back home, right? In classic Trump fashion. This is a war which is happening in their own backyard, and they realize that they don't have the defense capabilities.
Yeah.
Even though they have world's biggest state-of-the-art defense industries, they are designed to cater to their clients outside of Europe. They are not designed to produce or mass produce ammunition. For example, 155 shells. Nahi bana pa raha hai Europe, Since 2023, they've been saying that we are going to give Ukraine 1 million of these 155 shells. Nahi ho pa raha, aadha kar paaye. Why? Because the defense industries, regardless of how advanced they are not designed, they are not coordinated enough to actually mass produce these kind of things. Okay. And then they are not controlled by the government. It's not, in that classic sense, it's a very free market. So basically what Trump has been doing is that first time when he came to power in 2016, he told Europe that, listen, we are footing the bill for your security, and you are buying all the Russian gas. And for your economy, you are dependent on China. Because if you remember, Trump came and started all the trade wars
Yeah.
with China. He said that, what? Why do you want that? Why do you think that America is going to give you this free lunch forever? America is not going to give you this free lunch. If you want your security, you burden share. The minimum commitment that a NATO member has to make in order to remain a NATO member is 2% of its GDP. The biggest economies in Europe, France, Germany, a lot of them, they were not even doing that.
Yeah.
Okay, so in that sense, what Trump said was absolutely correct. That why do you think that we would give you a free lunch? I mean, enough of all this, yeah? Okay, you have to also fend for your own security. What are you doing for me that I should do for you, right? Because like I said, Trump is a businessman, right?
Yeah.
So Trump said that in 2016. And Trump obviously made some very harsh statements, etc. Back then, again, now you can obviously, everybody is a genius in hindsight and they can say that, oh yes, but Europeans knew where their problems were. But nobody really expected a conventional war to break out. Nobody really expected like a full-fledged invasion. See, there was already disturbance going on in Donbass. There was already disturbance going on in East Asia. In East Europe. Okay, in the Baltics, the region was destabilized. Ukraine, Crimea was destabilized. Of course, the Crimea was taken, but Donbass was destabilized. Moldova is a country where there's a separatist movement, which is a pro-Russian separatist movement. It's called Transnistria, the region that was destabilized. In Georgia, Ossetia, and South Ossetia and Abkhazia were destabilized. So basically, what I'm saying is that there was already a grey zone warfare going on in those regions. In fact, I don't know if you ever noticed that Estonia, it's a very tiny country, and Estonia is supposed to have one of the most formidable cyber capabilities, And why? How come they have it? They have it because they have somewhere strengthened themselves against the Russian malware. Okay, that is because, the Russians would always try to do something, and Russians are good with, with their cyber attacks and all that. So what I'm saying is that there was already a kind of a gray zone warfare going on in that region, and the region was already destabilized. And because Crimea was already disturbed, it was a disputed territory. Russians had claimed it, and the rest of the international community did not agree to that. Ukraine could not have become a NATO member, because for becoming a NATO member, you also have to settle all your territorial disputes. Otherwise, the Article 5 of the NATO treaty is forever active, no? Article 5 is the collective security article.
Yeah.
That is the ironclad security guarantee. So a NATO organization would not make a member which has a territorial dispute. Okay, otherwise then it will be perpetual war. So what I'm saying is that nobody really expected. You know what? I should share that. The war began in February 2022, no? In January 2022, we had the chief of the German naval staff come to IDSA. It's very much there on the IDF's YouTube channel, and please take a look. I coordinated that event, and he was a vice admiral, and because Germans had for the first time deployed a frigate, okay, in the Indo-Pacific region.
Yeah.
And the name of the frigate was Bayern. So the frigate Bayern, and he was basically wherever the frigate was docking. So this guy was coming and speaking, and very charismatic guy, I would say. He also had an Indian daughter-in-law, so he also felt a lot of connection with India, and we were speaking a lot about his son's choice and how he says that, oh, my son dances to Indian tunes, so that kind of a very nice guy. And that guy came. Of course, that became one of the most controversial videos ever, because basically I think he did not realize that it was live streamed on YouTube, and those were the times when we were coming out of COVID and all that. He just said a lot of very politically incorrect things about Russia, China, etc. But that is for the viewers to go and see, of course, if they want. But the key takeaway was that this guy was certain, and he was a chief of the naval staff from Germany, and he was certain that Putin doesn't want war. He only wants respect. You give him respect, that's all he wants. He wants a seat at the high table, and he wants to, you cannot corner him. Okay, that was the argument. What I'm saying is that nobody imagined a full-fledged war. Okay, once it started, the Europeans realized that they don't have the defense capabilities.
Yeah.
So now with Trump, and they have been preparing for this for the last 1 year. The problem is that whatever they are doing, there are 7-8 measures that they've taken, and those measures are called Trump-proofing. So they're wanting to Trump-proof themselves. But frankly, if you go by what I analyze, I would say that some of those measures are good for long-term bolstering of European capabilities. In the short term, they are not very useful for Ukraine right now. So yes, the Ukrainian position is in trouble. I mean, I wouldn't say that it's completely insulated. As far as Trump's coming back is concerned, there are a lot of people who realize the value and the silver lining, and they think that it has to be somebody like a Trump to really push the Europeans out of the slumber of the peace dividend years. Because right now there is no peace and there is no dividend to gain from it. And that's what I've written in my today's column also. So you need that kadvi dawai that Trump is actually giving them.
Diary of a Publisher. Here we don't just talk, we explore, question, and push beyond the ordinary. And if you're ready to see things from a fresh perspective, you're at the right place. Make sure to subscribe. We're just scratching the surface, and the next conversation might just change how you see the world.